The royal hall of the Veshtar dominion glittered like 1,000 frozen suns. Every wall shimmered with silver veins, and the air hummed softly with power. Princess Alara stood at the center, tall and radiant, her 4 luminous eyes fixed on the human visitor. He looked nothing like the proud warriors she was used to. No shining scales, no armored skin, no natural weaponry. His form was soft. His skin looked fragile, his eyes too small, and his smile far too gentle for someone who represented an entire species. His name was Commander Ryan Hale, Ambassador of Earth. To Alara, humans were strange creatures, barely a few centuries into space travel, yet their voices carried a strange confidence. They didn't bow to older empires. They didn't tremble before power. They simply smiled and spoke as if they belonged among the stars. The princess watched him closely as he approached the throne. Around her stood the noble houses of the Dominion, massive beings covered in gleaming carapace and elegant robes. They towered over the human, whispering in their melodic language. "It's so small," one of them murmured. "Soft, like a larva," another said. Ryan heard them, but he only smiled. He bowed his head politely and spoke in a clear voice that echoed across the hall. "I bring greetings from Earth and an offer of peace from our people." His voice was steady, calm. But behind that calmness, Alara sensed something else, something the Veshitar rarely felt from others. Emotion. It was not weakness, it was warmth. Alara had studied many species, predators who fought for dominance, civilizations that lived by logic alone, but none of them fascinated her like humans. They were unpredictable. They laughed when others cried. They dreamed when others feared. They cared deeply about things that seemed meaningless to others. It was confusing and strangely beautiful. When the formal greetings ended, Alara motioned for him to rise. "You may stand, human. You are far from your home. Tell me, why do your people seek the Dominion's friendship?" Ryan smiled faintly. "Because peace is better than fear, Your Highness, and because we believe understanding is the first step to survival." A ripple of surprise ran through the court. No one had ever spoken to the princess so directly, but Alara did not punish him. Instead, she tilted her head, intrigued. She wanted to know more. That night, during the welcoming feast, the hall was filled with light and song. Alien nobles floated delicately on their hover thrones, sipping glowing nectar. The human, however, sat simply, sharing stories, laughing with translators, asking about every dish served before him. Alara watched him from her high seat. The way he laughed, the way he listened. He treated everyone, no matter their status, with the same kindness. When the conversation turned toward customs of bonding and courtship, one of the Veshtar nobles leaned toward Ryan with a curious expression. "Human, how do your kind choose their mates? By scent, by lineage, by the great season?" Ryan laughed softly. "None of those, actually. Humans can... well, we can pair any time." The entire table went silent. Even the music faltered. Alara's crest lifted in disbelief. "Any time? You mean your species has no fixed season for union?" Ryan nodded slowly. "That's right. We don't wait for biology. We choose when we're ready. Sometimes young, sometimes old. Sometimes it happens once, sometimes more than once in a lifetime." The princess blinked, her silver pupils widening. "You choose? Your bodies do not command you?" He smiled again, but this time it was gentle, almost sad. "No, Your Highness. We don't need our bodies to tell us when to love. We just know." The hall whispered in confusion. Among the Veshtar, pairing was sacred and rare. It only happened once during the Great Convergence, when 2 bloodlines sang in perfect harmony. It was destiny, written by the stars. But humans? They could just choose? It sounded reckless. Impossible. Yet Ryan spoke with such quiet honesty that even the skeptical nobles hesitated to mock him. Alara's heart, calm and disciplined all her life, stirred for the first time. There was something powerful in that human's words, something she could not understand. Choice, freedom, love without command. Later that night, as the stars drifted over the palace dome, Elara stood by her window, looking at the small figure of the human walking in the courtyard below. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and whispered to herself, "They can pair any time without destiny, without the call of blood." Her voice trembled with disbelief, yet there was wonder too. For the first time, the princess of the Veshtar felt a question burning in her chest, a question she had never dared to ask before. What does it mean to love by choice? And in that quiet moment, under the light of 1,000 alien stars, the story of the princess and the human truly began. The next morning, the palace of Veshtar woke to a soft golden light that poured through crystal windows. The alien city below shimmered like a sea of glass, and from her high balcony, Princess Elara watched the human walk among her gardens. He stopped often, touching the glowing petals, smelling the air, smiling at creatures most visitors feared. There was curiosity in every step, and that strange, gentle warmth in his eyes again. Elara could not understand him. She had met warriors, kings and conquerors from 100 worlds, but this one human carried something none of them had: kindness without calculation. He looked so small in her vast world, yet he never seemed afraid. When her attendants brought her reports that morning, she barely heard them. Her mind was elsewhere, still turning over his words from the night before. Humans can pair any time. Any time. The words refused to leave her thoughts. To her people, love was a sacred moment decided by destiny. The great convergence came once in a lifetime, when a Veshtar's pulse matched perfectly with another's. Only then could they bond. But the human said they could love without that, without the song of blood, without command. Elara's chest tightened. It felt unfair. Was that even possible? Could emotion be stronger than nature itself? She needed to know. Later that day, she sent for him. Ryan arrived in his simple Earth uniform, bowing respectfully before her throne. His calmness irritated her, and fascinated her at the same time. "You requested my presence, Your Highness?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, rising slowly from her seat. Her silver robes flowed behind her like liquid moonlight. "Last night you spoke of human bonding. You said your people can pair any time. I need to understand what that means." He smiled, though he seemed a little nervous. "It means what it sounds like, Princess. We're not bound by seasons or rules. We love when we choose to." "Choose," she repeated, tasting the word. "As if it is something you can control?" He shook his head gently. "Not control, exactly. Sometimes it happens without warning, but it's not biology that commands us, it's our hearts." Elara's upper eyes narrowed. "Your hearts? You make it sound like a weapon." He chuckled softly. "In some ways it is." The princess felt a strange warmth rise in her chest at his laughter, and she quickly turned away to hide it. "You speak of love as though it is strength," she said. "It is," he replied simply. "It gives us courage when reason fails. It makes us do things we thought impossible." She turned back to him, her tone sharper now. "Impossible? You think emotion can defy biology, human?" "I know it can," he said, meeting her gaze without fear. For a moment the throne room was silent except for the hum of crystal lights. Their eyes, too silver, too blue, locked in quiet challenge. Elara took a step closer, her voice low. "Then prove it. Prove to me that humans can bond without command, without the call of your body." Ryan blinked. "Prove it? How?" She hesitated, then said, "Show me. Let me see this power you speak of." The human looked at her carefully. "Princess, love isn't something you can perform like a song. It's something you live." But she didn't care about excuses. She was a ruler, and rulers demanded proof. "If you cannot prove your claim," she said coldly, "then your words mean nothing." The guards shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene. Ryan sighed softly. "You really want proof?" I do, she said, and I will not rest until I understand. That night, Alara could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her chamber, remembering his eyes, so steady, so human. He had not lied. She could feel that much. Her species was born with the ability to sense truth through resonance, and his words had been completely clear. Humans really did love by choice. But how? She thought about her people, bound to tradition. None of them had ever questioned the great convergence. No one dared imagine love that wasn't chosen by destiny, and yet here was this fragile creature from a tiny blue planet saying, "We love because we choose to." She sat up suddenly, her chest heavy with confusion and something else. Curiosity, wonder, maybe even envy. Was it possible that humans were freer than the Veshtar? That their weakness, emotion, was actually their strength? She rose from her bed and walked to the balcony. The twin moons hung above like watchful eyes, silver and calm. Down below she could see the faint lights from the humans' guest quarters. Without thinking, she whispered into the night, "You say love is a choice, human. Then show me what it means to choose." Her voice trembled slightly as the wind carried it away. Ilara, princess of the Dominion, had faced wars, treaties, and galaxies of power. But for the first time in her life, she was facing something truly dangerous, an emotion she could not control. And though she did not know it yet, that small human would change her world forever. Days passed, but the question still burned in Princess Ilara's mind like a restless flame. We love because we choose to. She couldn't escape those words. They followed her everywhere, in council meetings, during royal ceremonies, even in her dreams. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the human's calm face, those strange blue eyes filled with warmth instead of pride. For someone so small, so fragile, he had left an echo inside her heart. But Ilara was not a creature ruled by feelings. She was the heir to the Dominion, raised to control her emotions, to rule through logic and strength. Still, she could not stop wondering if humans truly had something her own people lacked. So she decided to find out for herself. One morning, she called for Commander Ryan again. When he entered the throne hall, he found her standing before the great crystal window, the twin suns painting her figure in golden light. She didn't turn to face him when she spoke. "Human, I have thought about your words. You said your kind can love without command, without the pull of biology." "Yes," he said carefully. "That's true. Then I must see it for myself," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were trembling slightly behind her back. Ryan tilted his head. "See it?" She finally turned toward him, her silver eyes shining like stars. "Prove it to me. Show me that you can bond without nature forcing you. Show me what this choice means to your kind." Ryan blinked in surprise. "Princess, love isn't something I can just demonstrate on command. It's not like turning on a light." Her crest lifted slightly, a gesture of challenge. "You said love gives your kind strength, courage, even purpose. If that is true, then you must be able to show it." He sighed softly, glancing at the massive hall around them. The Veshitar guards were watching silently, curious. The nobles whispered among themselves, eager to see how this strange human would respond to the princess's demand. Ryan took a slow breath. "All right," he said at last. "If you really want proof, then let me tell you a story." Ilara frowned. "A story?" "Yes," he said gently. "Because that's how we humans prove things, not through biology or rituals, but through the lives we live." He began to speak. He told her about two people from Earth, ordinary humans, who met during a great war. They had no reason to love each other. They were from enemy nations, but in the ruins of battle they found hope in one another. They chose love, even when the world told them to hate. He spoke of parents who sacrificed everything for their children, of friends who stayed by each other's side until their last breath. He told her about a man who waited decades for the woman he loved, even after losing her across the stars, because love, he said, is not bound by time or distance. As Ryan spoke, his voice grew quiet but full of feeling. Every word carried weight, as if pulled from the deepest part of his soul. Ilara listened, motionless. No warrior's speech, no poem had ever touched her like this. When he finally stopped, the hall was silent. The princess looked at him, her throat tight. "Why would your kind suffer so much for love?" Why risk pain for something that can break you? Ryan smiled sadly. Because that's what makes it real, princess. The risk, the choice, the pain. Without those things, love would just be instinct. His words sank into her like light into water. For a long time, she said nothing. Then softly she whispered, I still do not understand. Ryan took a step closer. You don't have to understand it, he said gently. You just have to feel it. Elara felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not her advisors, not the priest, not even her family. He spoke to her as if she were not a ruler, not a symbol, but a person. Something deep inside her began to stir, an emotion she had no name for. That night, when the halls were empty and silent, Elara stood alone on her balcony. The stars stretched endlessly above her and the soft wind brushed against her silver skin. She pressed a hand to her chest. Her pulse was racing. She had demanded proof from the human, but what he gave her was far more dangerous. His words had opened a door inside her heart, a door that could never be closed again. As she gazed up at the endless stars, she whispered softly to herself, He speaks of love, as if it is power. And maybe it is. Below her, the human's quarters were dark, but she could sense him there, calm, steady, unaware that he had already begun to change her world. For the first time in her life, the princess of the Veshtar was afraid, not of war, not of death, but of the feeling she could no longer deny, the beginning of something impossible. The next day began like any other in the royal palace, but for Princess Elara, nothing felt the same anymore. The walls looked too bright, the halls too quiet, and every step she took echoed with the memory of the human's words. You don't have to understand love. You just have to feel it. Those words haunted her. For the first time in her life, Elara could not focus on her duties. During council meetings, she found herself staring out the window, watching the sky instead of listening to her advisors. When she tried to meditate, her thoughts kept returning to him, his calm voice, his warm eyes, his stories about humans who loved without reason. So she decided to act. If love was something humans felt, then she would learn to feel it. She would make this her experiment, her proof. She sent a message to Ryan requesting his company every day for cultural exchange lessons. But in truth, it was more than diplomacy. It was curiosity. The first lesson began in the royal gardens. The air shimmered with golden mist, and giant flowers glowed softly beneath the twin suns. Ryan arrived early, holding a small bag. Inside it were simple earth objects, things he said carried meaning to his people. He showed her an old photograph of his family. This is my mother and father, he said. They taught me what love looks like before I ever understood it. Elara studied the image carefully. They look fragile, she said quietly. Ryan smiled. They are, but that's what makes them precious. Humans love because we know we're fragile, because every moment could be the last. The princess fell silent. She had never thought of life that way. The Veshtar lived long, nearly immortal lives. To them, time was endless. But to humans, time was short. And maybe that was why their emotions burned so brightly. In the days that followed, they met again and again. Sometimes they talked about their worlds. Other times they simply sat in silence, watching the strange glowing creatures that floated through the gardens. Ryan told her about rain, how it felt to stand in it, cold and free with drops running down your face. Elara had never felt rain. Her planet's skies had not wept for centuries. He laughed gently when she tilted her head in wonder. One day I'll show you, he said. You can't bring rain to Veshtar, she replied. Then I'll make it rain for you, he said with a grin. Something inside her chest fluttered. A strange, light feeling that frightened her more than any battle ever could. Over time, the palace servants began to whisper. The human and the princess were often seen walking together under the moons, their voices soft, their laughter echoing through the gardens. The nobles disapproved, of course. They called it dangerous, improper, unnatural. But Elara no longer cared. She was learning something her people had forgotten, the power of small things, the sound of laughter, the comfort of another's presence, the warmth of choice. One evening, as they sat by the silver lake that reflected the stars, Elara asked quietly, Tell me, Ryan, How do humans know when they have fallen in love? He looked at her for a long moment before answering. It's different for everyone. For some, it's a spark. The first look, the first touch. For others, it's slow, like dawn breaking after a long night. But you always know because the world starts to feel different. She frowned slightly. Different how? Ryan smiled. Everything becomes brighter. Even the silence feels alive. And when the person leaves, the world feels too quiet. Alara's heart thudded softly in her chest. She looked away quickly, staring at the lake. That sounds dangerous. It is, he said. But it's also beautiful. That night, when she returned to her chambers, she couldn't sleep. The stars seemed to whisper his words over and over. Brighter. Alive. Beautiful. She touched her chest again, feeling her pulse race beneath her skin. Her people called this a sign of imbalance, but she knew it was not sickness. It was something new, something human. The next morning, she looked at herself in the mirror and whispered softly, So this is what they feel. This is what it means to choose. She smiled faintly. Though her eyes shone with tears, she didn't understand. The experiment had begun as a search for proof. But somewhere along the way, the princess had stopped observing. She had become part of it. And though neither of them said it out loud, both the human and the alien knew something impossible had already started growing between them. Not destiny. Not biology, but choice. The days on Veshtar began to change. The royal gardens, once quiet and sacred, were now alive with laughter and soft human songs. The wind carried strange earth melodies across the silver leaves, and even the creatures of the night paused to listen. Everyone in the palace noticed. The human ambassador, once a distant guest, had become a constant presence beside the princess. Where she went, he followed, not as a servant or advisor, but as something unspoken, something no one dared name. At first, the nobles whispered in amusement, then in anger, and finally, in fear, because they could see what their princess could not. She was falling for the human. Alara herself tried to deny it. She told herself it was still an experiment, still a study of emotion. But when she saw Ryan smile, her chest tightened in ways that had nothing to do with science. When he spoke her name, her pulse quickened, and when he laughed, it felt like sunlight breaking through the cold halls of duty. The high priests began to notice her changes. They came to her one evening, their long robes sweeping the marble floor. Your Highness, said the eldest priest, his voice deep and heavy, the council grows uneasy. You are the last royal of pure Veshtar blood. You cannot allow this human to confuse your heart. Alara stood silent for a long moment. The priest's words echoed in her mind like a warning bell. Our hearts do not choose, princess, another priest reminded her. They answer the call of the convergence. That is our law, our sacred way. She turned to face them, her silver eyes sharp. And what if the call never comes? She asked quietly. The priests looked at one another in alarm. Alara's voice softened. You speak of destiny, but what if destiny is not enough? What if love should not wait for permission from the stars? The eldest priest's crest darkened, a sign of fear and anger. You speak dangerously, child. The great convergence binds us to balance. To defy it is to risk your soul. But Alara did not look away. Then let it be at risk. That night a storm gathered over the crystal spires of the palace. For the first time in centuries, thunder rolled across Veshitar's sky. Ryan found her standing on the balcony, the wind tugging at her silver hair. You shouldn't be out here, he said softly. It's dangerous. She turned to him, her eyes shining with defiance and something deeper. You once told me love is a rebellion of the soul. Were you telling the truth? He hesitated, then nodded. Every word. Alara stepped closer, the storm flashing behind her like a heartbeat of the heavens. Then I want to rebel, Ryan blinked. What do you mean? I want to know what it feels like to choose, she said, her voice trembling. To love without fate, without command, to feel the way you do. For a moment neither of them moved. The wind howled around them, carrying the scent of electric rain. Then Ryan spoke quietly. Alara, if you choose this, you'll break your world's law. I've spent my life obeying laws, she whispered. And yet I've never truly lived. He stared at her for a long, silent moment, then slowly reached out his hand. When their fingers touched, a pulse of light spread between them, soft, warm, and alive. The energy rippled through the air like a heartbeat that belonged to both of them. Alara gasped. What is this? Ryan smiled faintly. Maybe the universe saying it's okay to choose. Tears gathered in her eyes. For the first time, she felt what her people called impossible. A bond born not of biology, but of will. By dawn, the palace was alive with rumors. The priests had felt the pulse from miles away. They knew something sacred had been broken. They came to her chambers demanding answers, shouting words of blasphemy and ruin. Elara stood before them, her face calm, but her heart steady. You said I could not bond without the convergence, she said softly. But I did, and I did not break. The priests were silent, their eyes wide with disbelief. She took a deep breath. Perhaps the stars do not choose for us. Perhaps we are meant to choose for ourselves. And though the priests left in fury, whispering of curses and punishment, Elara felt no fear. Because when Ryan found her later that morning and their hands brushed again, she felt that same warmth rise between them, proof that her choice had power. That night, she looked up at the twin moons and whispered into the sky, "If love is a rebellion, then I have begun my war." And deep inside her heart, the bond glowed softly, fragile, beautiful, and defiant. For the first time in the history of her people, a Veshitar princess had chosen love over destiny. And though she knew it would cost her everything, she smiled, because at last she understood the human truth. To love is to live, even if it breaks the rules of the stars. The sun rose pale and cold over the city of Veshtar, but the royal palace was filled with tension, hotter than fire. Whispers spread through the marble halls like, "Smoke, the princess has broken the sacred law." She bonded outside the convergence with the human. By noon, the entire dominion knew. High priests gathered in the throne hall, their silver robes dragging across the floor like heavy clouds. The noble houses arrived soon after, their faces tight with fear and anger. For them, what Elara had done was not only forbidden, it was unthinkable. She had touched an outsider. She had chosen her heart over the will of the stars, but Princess Elara did not hide. When she entered the hall, she walked alone, no guards, no crown, no shield of rank. She wore a simple white robe instead of royal armor. Behind her, Ryan followed quietly, his expression calm but his eyes watchful. As she stepped onto the great crystal floor, the hall fell silent. One of the priests rose first, his voice trembling with fury. "Princess Elara of Veshtar," he thundered, "you have broken the law of the convergence. You have joined yourself to an alien. Do you deny it?" Elara looked up, her gaze clear. "I do not." A wave of gasps swept through the hall. The priest's crest flared crimson. "Then you bring ruin to our kind. No Veshtar can bond without the convergence. The blood cannot mix. The balance cannot hold. You risk death itself." Her voice was steady when she answered. "Then let the stars decide if I am wrong." She turned to the crowd, to the nobles, to the priests, and finally to Ryan. Her expression softened when her eyes met his. "I demanded proof once," she said softly, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I asked this human to show me what it means to love by choice. I mocked him for believing in such a thing, and now I stand before you as that proof." Her words struck like lightning. Ryan took a step forward, his voice low but strong. "We didn't mean to defy your customs, but love doesn't ask for permission. It just happens," the nobles murmured in confusion. The priest shouted in anger, but Elara raised her hand and silence returned. "Look at me," she said to them. "You feared I would break. You feared my bond would destroy me, but I am still here." She placed a hand on her chest. "My pulse still beats. My blood still sings. The stars have not turned against me." She took Ryan's hand. The hall gasped again, but this time the air shimmered. A faint golden light bloomed where their fingers met, spreading gently through the chamber like dawn breaking through darkness. The priest stumbled back. Stunned, Elara's voice trembled, but it was full of power. "You said love can only come from the stars. You said the heart cannot choose. But the stars did not make this light. We did." The glow grew brighter, wrapping around the pair like a living flame. It was not violent. It was beautiful, warm, pure, alive. Ryan looked at her, awe in his eyes. "Elara?" She smiled through her tears. "This is the proof I demanded, isn't it?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, and you were the one who found it." The hall was silent again, but this time the silence was different. not of judgment, of awe. One by one, the nobles lowered their heads. Even the priests, proud and ancient, could not deny what they saw. The princess had broken every rule of her world, and yet she stood radiant, untouched, glowing with the truth that had defied every law of nature. Alara looked at her people and spoke once more, her voice steady and strong. "Perhaps love is not a command from the stars," she said. "Perhaps it is the voice of the soul. The stars do not tell us who to love. They only light the way so we can find them." A soft wind passed through the hall, carrying her words to every corner. And in that moment, something ancient inside her people began to change. When the ceremony ended, Ryan and Alara stepped outside together. The city lights shimmered like fireflies beneath the twin suns. She took a deep breath and whispered, "I was supposed to prove your kind wrong. Instead, you proved something to me. That love is the strongest force in the universe." Ryan smiled, brushing his thumb across her hand. "No, princess. You proved it." She laughed softly, tears glimmering on her cheeks. "Maybe humans are not so fragile after all." He grinned. "We're fragile, yes, but our hearts are tougher than steel." And as the golden light of the setting suns wrapped around them, the people of Veshitar looked up to their princess, not in shame, but in wonder, because she had shown them the one truth their kind had forgotten. Love does not wait for destiny. Love creates it. Years passed, and the story of Princess Alara and the human ambassador became a legend whispered across the stars. At first, the Veshtar dominion struggled to accept what had happened. Many still believed their princess had broken sacred law, that she had defied the order of the stars. But as time moved on, something strange began to happen. The princess did not fall ill. She did not weaken or lose her mind, as the priests had warned. Instead, she grew stronger, her light brighter than before, her voice carrying peace instead of command. And by her side always was the human who had once been called fragile. Together, they became a symbol of something greater than law or tradition. They became the living proof that love could exist beyond biology, beyond fate, beyond the limits of species and blood. The palace changed with them. Where once the halls were silent, now laughter echoed between the silver pillars. The gardens, once reserved for royalty, were open to everyone. Children of all kinds, Veshtar, human, and other species from far worlds, played together under the twin suns. Alara often watched them from her balcony, smiling softly. Beside her, Ryan would stand with his arm around her waist, his expression peaceful. "When I was young," she once said quietly, "I was taught that the stars decided everything for us. Who we are, what we feel, who we love." Ryan looked at her with that same warm smile she had fallen in love with. "Maybe the stars just give us a stage," he said. "It's up to us to write the story." Alara turned to him, her silver eyes glowing with affection. "And we wrote ours together. But peace was not easy. Some still hated. Some could not forget the old ways. When a small rebellion of purists rose against the princess, claiming she had cursed the dominion with her defiance, Alara refused to meet violence with violence. Instead, she stood before the angry crowd and spoke with the strength of love itself. "You fear that our bond is a weakness," she said, her voice steady and clear. "But look around you. Have the skies fallen? Has the light faded from our cities? No, love has not broken us, it has healed us." Her words spread like light through darkness. The rebellion ended not with war, but with silence and tears. Many of those who once hated her fell to their knees, realizing that the world had not ended, it had only changed. And change, they understood at last, was not a curse. It was life. Time moved gently after that. Alara and Ryan continued to rule, not as conquerors, but as partners. He taught her people about humanity's art, music, and stories. She taught humans about the Veshtar's wisdom and balance. Together they built something neither world could have made alone. When other alien civilizations came to question them, Alara would say proudly, "We are proof that the heart does not belong to one species. It belongs to anyone brave enough to listen to it." Her words became the foundation of a new age of peace, an age where humans and Veshtar worked side by side, not as strangers but as family. Years later, when Alara grew old, her silver hair now faint and her steps slower, she would often sit by the same silver lake where she had once asked Ryan what love felt like. The water still shimmered with stars, and sometimes she could almost hear their younger voices there, laughing and learning under the moonlight. Ryan, his hair streaked with gray, sat beside her. He took her hand gently, their fingers still glowing faintly as they had that first night when their bond was formed. "Do you remember?" she whispered softly, "when I demanded proof?" Ryan chuckled, his eyes soft. "How could I forget? You were terrifying." She laughed, a fragile, beautiful sound. "And yet, you stayed." "I would have stayed 1,000 lifetimes," he said. They sat in silence for a while, watching the reflection of the twin moons on the water. Then Alara spoke again, her voice quiet and full of peace. "You humans," she said, smiling faintly. "You truly can pair any time." Ryan squeezed her hand. "And forever," he whispered. A tear rolled down her cheek, not from sadness, but from gratitude. When the Princess of Veshtar finally passed into the stars, her people built a monument of crystal and light, not of stone, not of war, but of two figures standing hand in hand. At its base, carved in every language of the Dominion, were her last words. "Love is not given by the stars. It is the light we create within ourselves." And every child, human or alien, grew up hearing her story, the tale of the alien princess who demanded proof and found it in the heart of a human. Because in the end, that was her legacy, that love was not destiny. It was choice, and that choice could change the stars themselves.